Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another album review. My name is Christian Eschbach. Hey there, everyone. I figured I would follow up my last Alice Cooper review with the follow-up album to the album I reviewed in the last review. So the last review was Brutal Planet. This one is Dragontown. You can tell this one's taking a little bit of a pounding. I bought this album when it first came out. I have listened to it quite a few times since then. And I'm doing this for two reasons. Not only is this the follow up album to the last album, but directly connected to the last album I reviewed, which would be the Iommi Glenn Hughes Fused album. And the reason why this is being the direct follow-up to that is these were both done by Bob Marlette, both produced, and so is the Brutal Planet album. And I will say that this point in time, so you're looking at like 99 through 2000. Well, this would have been 2000. The Iommi album would have been 2004, so you're looking at least at 2005. Marlette basically designed what the ultimate sound for metal in that period should sound like. Okay, I don't care what anybody says, man. He had it on the nose in that time of what metal should, how thick and rich and full it should sound like. The downside is some of the albums sound kind of similar-ish. If you've watched my Brutal Planet review and then you've watched the Fused review, you know where I'm kind of going a little bit. But, let's be very, very clear. I'm not saying that this album sounds like either of those albums. There is a production sound to it that is the same, that makes them all sound similar. But they do not sound the same, okay? Like, it's kind of, yeah. Okay, let's get into the music. All right, the album opens up with Trigger Man. I don't know. I don't mind Trigger Man. It works, but it's not one that I'm really into. I'm not. As much as I love playing Grand Theft Auto is kind of where my gun violence begins and ends. I'm not a big gun guy. I grew up in a house with guns, with hunting and stuff like that, so I have nothing against guns in general. I'm just not a shoot and kill kind of guy, I'm more of a slashy, choky kind of guy. So Trigger Man doesn't do too much for me. It's not a bad tune, but it just doesn't do too much for me. Deeper's not a bad tune again. Compared to Brutal Planet, I really kind of found that these two songs were kind of softer openings. And when I say softer, I don't mean like, they're musically softer. I just mean they don't have the same kind of kick and punch that Brutal Planet opened up with. Then we get into Dragontown. Now, I really dig Dragontown. I really dig Dragontown. Probably one of my favorite songs on this album. This one is slower, but only in tempo. Really thick, really heavy atmosphere on this one, man. Beautiful atmosphere on this one. And just the general narrative about, just how everything was becoming sensory overload at that time. And this is, like 2000, right? It's only amped up a million times since then. But I really love where Alice goes with Dragontown. I always have since the moment it came out, like it's got some great lyrics. And the music is just fantastic. Just got this great, slow, perfect punching tempo, boom, boom, but it just, perfect. Then we're into Sex, Death, and Money. Okay, so it surprised me that it took Alice so long to release a song called Sex, Death, and Money. And the reason why I find it so interesting as it took so long is Alice has been saying since like as long as I can remember early interviews going into like at least around the point of Trash, where Alice was saying, well, Alice Cooper's always been about sex, death, and money. I'm pretty sure there's interviews from the 70s of him saying that, but he couldn't have been as point blank about saying sex, death, and money. Sex would have been taboo. The death and money might have been okay. um, but I just sex, death, and money is another one where it just really just it's one of those Alice Cooper songs, man. Like it tells you what Alice is, what the persona of Alice is. Not Vincent Fournier, but the persona of Alice Cooper, Sex, death, and money, It's great. Fantasy Man, I love this one, man. This is such a great song. This is one of those typical tongue-in-cheek, satirical kind of things where, most people listening to Fantasy Man are going to be kind of like your dude bros and your I don't want to say your red pillars, but your red pillar stuff like that. They're going to listen to Fantasy Man and be like, yeah, stick it to them, yeah. Not realizing that Fantasy Man is actually kind of making fun of those people, for them being the way they are. I love Fantasy Man though, man. It is such a great, funny, cocky, tongue-in-cheek, satirical kind of tune. I just love it. Somewhere in the Jungle. I don't mind this one, but it's kind of a more or less forgettable tune, I guess. Disgraceland. This is Alice doing Elvis, and I really like Disgraceland for the fun humor of Disgraceland. It is purely an album track only, though. And, it's kind of fun to hear Alice pay homage to Elvis, but it being homage in a way of Elvis looking at the way his memory has turned out and his legacy has been tarnished and how everything's just related to Elvis has gotten so screwed up. Like, there's a great line in there about how did Elvis how did Lisa Marie end up with him or something like that. And it's just kind of like, wow, man. Sister Sarah. I like this one, but I don't like this one. Most of my reason for not liking this one, I don't have a good reason. I don't mind it. It just doesn't do much for me. That's I guess how it works. Every Woman Has a Name. The Ballad. I actually don't mind this one. Generally, I'm not a big fan of the Alice Cooper ballads. I'm generally not a fan of ballads in general. Alice ones in particular, I really usually have issues with. I usually say that Alice should not do ballads, should not sing ballads. Every Woman Has a Name, though, I don't mind. I actually don't mind this one. This one works for him. That is followed up with I Just Wanna Be God. Yeah. I just wanna be. You gotta be God. I love this one, man. This is another one that is just so cocky. I used to quote this one all the time for fun. That's another one too, though. Like you're gonna have two types of people who listen to this. You're gonna have people listen to this one, and they're gonna be like, "Yeah, man, I just want to be the big number one." And then you're gonna have the ones that are gonna listen and go, you do realize that this album is totally about how these people are all not great people, right? It's Much Too Late follows that up, and honestly, that one's not overly memorable. And then the album finishes up with The Sentinel, and I feel like with finishing up with The Sentinel, they were trying to replicate how they finished up with Cold Machines on Brutal Planet and just didn't work the same way. Okay, so Brutal Planet to me is basically like a really great album the whole way through. A couple songs I'm not a fan of, no big deal. This one, it's got 4 or 5 songs I really enjoy. But for the most part, I definitely don't listen to this album anywhere near as much as I listen to Brutal Planet. I mean, I don't mind it, but it's just not... It's not as strong of an album. It's not as... like, when you look at past albums with Alice, usually you get one good one, one so-so, one good one, one so-so. That's typical with Alice. And it's usually you got the strong lead-out album, And then you got the follow-up album. And there's multiple times where this has happened. Sometimes, actually, it works out that the follow-up album is the better album. And in the past, I could argue that was always the case. When you look at Easy Action versus Pretty For You, I will argue that Easy Action is definitely the better album. You look at Love It to Death versus Killer. I love It to Death, but Killer's a perfect 10 album. You look at School's Out, and then you've got Billion Dollar Babies. Muscle of Love, the follow-up to that being Welcome to My Nightmare. So usually it's the second album is usually the stronger album. But that kind of changed a little bit. Now, depending on where you fall, when you get into the 80s, it kind of swung a little bit the other way for a while because, you had From the Inside, which was a really good album, which followed up after Lace and Whiskey. And then you had Flush the Fashion, which was definitely a better album than Special Forces. And then you got Zipper Catches, which was followed up by Dada. And even if I've got the order on, I always mix up Special Forces and Zipper Catches on which one came out in which order. Either way, those were both horrible albums. I don't care what any Alice Cooper fan says. Then you get to Dada, and Dada's kind of ending on a high note, even though career-wise it was a really low note at that time. But then you get into the later part of the 80s where you got Constrictor, and then you got Raise Your Fist and Yell. Some people will arguably say, and I'm not going to say they're wrong, that Constrictor is the better of those two albums. I'm personally a fan of Raise Your Fist and Yell instead. But I would say as a whole, Constrictor might arguably be the better of those two albums. Then after that, you've got Trash. Arguably the biggest album since Welcome to My Nightmare. Arguably one of the biggest albums, even if it's not one of my favorites. But then you got Trash, and then you got the follow-up to it, which was Hey Stupid. Trash did better than Hey Stupid did. Hey Stupid, I personally think, was a better album. But that also goes back into that cycle of the every other album, because you got Trash, which was, okay album. Then you got Hey Stupid, which was, I think a far superior album. And then you've got Last Temptation, which goes on to that downswing again. But then you get into the post-box set years. And that's where you get to here. And it kind of swings the other way, where the first album's a good one, and the second one's kind of not as good. You got Brutal Planet's the good one. Dragontown, not as good. Along Came a Spider is fantastic. Welcome to My Nightmare is not so great. Detroit Stories, fantastic. Road, not as good. So there's just kind of like that flow of momentum, I find. And this is kind of what kicked off that flow of momentum in the New Year's. Arguably, because I left out two in there. I left out Eyes of Alice Cooper and Dirty Diamonds. Those ones are kind of... you can go either way on those. Anyways, folks, I've rambled a lot on this one. It's Alice. I always do that. So, Bob Marlette, fantastic producer. He had nothing to do with what was wrong with this. I think everything that was wrong with this album just boiled down to was leftovers from the previous album. My thoughts, my views, my opinions. Let me know what your thoughts and views and opinions are. That is what the comment section is for down below. Drop me a line. Let me know what you think. On your way down there, you're going to see a couple links as well. Check those out. If you can hit the like button, subscribe button, bell for notifications, I would greatly appreciate that. Otherwise, folks, peace, love, take care.